Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Allison. I am a student at South Dakota State University studying math education and American Indian history and culture. Today we're here to talk about Indigenous research, and I have two fabulous researchers here who I will let introduce themselves in just a moment. But first I would like to recognize that we are filming on the ancestral homeland of the Ocheti Shikoan. We honor the Seven Council Fires and who first lived on this land before Brookings, South Dakota was ever established, and who continue to shape our community every day. So without further ado, I will let my lovely guests here introduce themselves to you. Joshua?
Hi, my name is Joshua Rudnik. I'm an assistant professor at South Dakota State University, teaching American Indian and Indigenous Studies. I actually got my teaching, or started teaching at University of South Dakota, teaching English classes, so kind of made a big jump from American Indian to American Indian Studies, but I've really enjoyed it. And beyond being a professor, I am a board member for the South Dakota Humanities Council, and I'm also a board member for the Federation of State Humanities Councils. I am an avid reader, a cat dad, and a Lego enthusiast. So, thank you.
Stacy?
And I am Stacy Chidaushe. I am the program coordinator for the South Dakota Humanities Council. Kind of worn a few different hats throughout my career, I suppose. I've worked in education, I've worked in nonprofits, I've worked in a domestic abuse shelter. I've kind of done a little bit of everything, but I guess my focus has always been people. And so I love people and I love research, which we're going to get into. But outside of my role at the Humanities Council, I'm a grandma, I'm a mom, and a wife. I too am a cat fanatic, and I too like books. So that's me in a nutshell.
All right, amazing. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I really appreciate your input. Um, well, I'd like to start off with what drew you to research in the first place.
Well, it's fun. I found, in my undergrad, I found that I just could dive into all this research, sometimes going into rabbit holes, but in that process, I learned that I love doing that, and I just loved learning and gaining that knowledge. You may not do anything with that knowledge, but at least it's up here, and you know that, right? And then once I got into my master's and PhD, I realized that research can really help your community wherever you are, right? And I think we assume that research a lot of times is tied to the medical fields or sciences, but the humanities is also part of it. Also does research too. So for me, it was just kind of realizing that getting a bigger picture of what research really is. So, in short, to help my community, that's why I got into it.
That's a good reason.
Well, when I was a kid, this doesn't tell you how old I am. I used to read a lot of Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys books, so I was always a detective. So I thought I'm going to solve every mystery there is, on the planet. But as I grew up, one of the things that was always instilled in me was if you know better, you do better, and so I always wanted to know better. Humanities, as Joshua was speaking about, and that's what we do at the Humanities Council, obviously, if it pertains to the human condition, human life, it's a humanities subject. So, and there's a lot of noise out there. I mean, there's a lot of, stuff that people might perceive to be a fact and might not be. So when you engage in research and you find out for yourself what the real story is, and then you have the opportunity to share that. And then that can make things better for everybody.
Right? Yeah. Part of the reason why I'm here right now. So what research have you participated in before?
So, well, like I said, all of my degrees are in writing. So a lot of my research has been focused on literature. During my PhD, I did a little pivot to focusing more on contemporary Native American and Indigenous authors, looking at poetry and fiction, creative nonfiction, whatever they write. And one of the things about that type of literature that I'm really interested in is what kind of techniques they're using that they can call their own. Because one of the criticisms of people who are labeled Native American authors is, well, they're not really engaging in culture because they're kind of taking on the elements of a Western writing system, right? And well, that's a valid concern or a valid criticism. I disagree with that to a certain extent, and they are doing something completely different. So you take Layli Long Soldier, for instance. She's doing amazing things, kind of doing visual art and combining language with it. Right, those are the types of things that are unique to Indigenous poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Other poets do that, but for instance, Layla Long Soldier does it with intention, right? She says she does it to prove a point and to kind of get you to start thinking about the world around you.
Yeah. Very cool. Stacy?
And for mine, and mine's not as cool as Joshua's. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in sociology, and when I was pursuing both of those degrees, I looked into. I guess I did a paper called "Till There's Nothing Left But the Moo," and that was a research into the treatment and experience of immigrant workers in meatpacking plant, and what they experience is unique. I also did a paper called "Dirty Work," and it was when you think of sanitation workers and crime scene cleaners and all the people who do the dirty work, how it was just an exploration into how do they perceive themselves, and it kind of goes to the sociological concept of othering, and I won't get into all that. But then I have a master's in adult higher education, and I was really interested in the James Coleman in 1966 did a report on the separate but equal segregated schools, and I was curious as to how that would look in a more modern perspective. So I took his rubric that he used for the Coleman report, and I applied it to BIE and tribal schools to see, is separate but equal really separate but equal. And so I've always kind of been, I guess, nosy. I want to know, I want to know.
Yeah.
And so with what I do now, that's kind of where I'm at too. If like something doesn't seem right, I'm going to look into it just because I want to know.
I think that's a good explanation. I haven't thought about it that way. It's like you're kind of snooping in on people's personal lives, right? And as Americans, we love that, right? I think as Americans, we are voyeurs. So I think with research, it allows you to open that door and see the inner workings of things.
Yep. And rabbit holes are my favorite place to hang out. I mean, you can go down that rabbit hole and you could be down there for a while, but wow, what you come out with. I mean, research just makes you grow.
Yes. I have done a little bit of research, not to the extent that you two have, but
you guys have.
Yeah. Most of my research has revolved around education. That's really my passion, and that's what I want to know about is how I can make education better for everybody. Currently, I'm working on research to kind of take Indigenous values and culture and implement them into Western schools so that we can combine the two together, make something that works for everybody. Joshua, can you tell us about a little bit of research that you're working on right now?
Yes. Well, so kind of twofold. I'm actively working on a research project with some colleagues of mine. Forgive me, I forget the title of it. I can send it to you later, but it is looking at where the habitability zones of bison in the continental North America, and what they're seeing is that after they've done all this modeling. By the way, it's with animal scientists and natural resource management science, so not my field at all. So I'm thinking, like, what can I offer to this conversation? But what they're looking at is they're putting in all this data and they're showing that because of climate change, the habitability zone is going to move further up into Canada, and I'm really interested in that. For one, because Indigenous people specifically, I speak from a Lakota's perspective, that we see the bison as a sibling, a brother. Right? We grew up with them. We know them intimately. We know their behavior patterns, or we used to, right? And obviously, we became separated from them, whether it was intentionally or unintentionally. I really think there are homelands, and I'm really interested in exploring what does that mean when the bison leave and we're not allowed to leave, right? Because our communities are bound in space. So I don't know. I want to explore that a little bit more. Specifically, I was brought onto this project to help communicate their findings out. So another big aspect is if I look at my whole career, right, working in group homes, teaching, um, I really am a big advocate for people to use their voices and feel confident that they can do that. So a large part of that is making sure that everything is accessible, that everybody can understand what's going on. And this is a big deal for indigenous communities because oftentimes they are left out of that conversation. Or people do studies that involve community members and then they don't share them out, or they do share them, but it's dense language that they can't really understand. Um, so yeah, for this project, I'm specifically uh, exploring ways on how we can make that research a little bit more palatable to the general public. And this is really, I mean, it's important because first off, we're seeing like this currently we're seeing this backlash towards science, right? And part of that is our own fault, I believe, because of that dense language. So the layperson can come in and look at a research report that was compiled for the NIH or any other agency, and they're probably not going to be able to understand what it's saying, right?
Sure.
Not to say that people can't, right? But I mean, I could venture to say that there's probably research projects out there that it just goes over their head. It goes over my head too, right? But just think about where we could be if those things were translated into a language that everybody understands, right? And in part, that's what public education is for. But then when you get to the college level, you feel like you have to use those big words. And, well, those big words are great and fun. You don't have to use them all the time to communicate with people, right? So I'm a very plain spoken person, and I think that academics can be that. We just need to like step out of our spaces a little bit more. We don't need to be so insular. And again, that's another thing. I'm sorry, I'm just going.
Oh, yeah, keep going.
With education, right? We were seeing some backlash against education, right? And again, it's our own fault because we are so insular. And not necessarily here at SDSU, because I understand. I mean, I don't live here in Brookings, but I understand when I come to SDSU that they have a really good relationship with the community. They work with the community. In contrast to where I went to grad school in Vermillion, there was not that relationship, right? So if there was a little bit more outreach into the general public and saying, higher education isn't scary, right? We are here for you. We are here to serve you as a community, especially at SDSU being a land grant university. Right? Land grant universities are supposed to provide education for all. And Dr. Dunn has mentioned this too, right? He says that occasionally, right? Land grants universities, yes, they have terrible background, but there's nothing we can do about that now. What can we do about it now is to provide that education for everybody.
Right. Yeah. And going back to what you said about research language, especially getting into my research journey, I can confirm it is confusing and it just goes right over my head too.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes years to understand these concepts. When I was in grad school, I was first introduced to critical theory. Most of it went way over my head. And the reason why it's so dense, it takes a little while for your brain to metabolize it, right? There are still things that I don't understand about critical theory, but upon revisiting things that I read in grad school, just by virtue of growth and further education, I'm able to understand them a little bit more. So I think that might be a good tactic for people too, is just because you try it once and look at it once, and it's not for you, well, give it a couple years and see where it is.
Yeah. Are you working on anything right now, Stacy?
I am, and it's like I just get so inspired when I listen to him. For me, like, for my research, it's a little bit different because of my role. I kind of start with what I call the big six journalistic questions. So, as a trained sociologist, my first inclination is to ask the what and the why. Then my background in education leads me into I call it the how, the when and the how. And so when you combine those four, you get the answers to the last two, which are where and when. I had to think about where are the six questions, where and when. And so that's kind of how I approach everything. So my research that I'm working on is kind of pretty widely varied, but it all kind of comes back to like social issues, social justice, the important conversations that we need to have. I have a program. I'm very fortunate. I have a program with the Humanities Council. It's a biweekly program called Humanities Cafe, and I have the opportunity to invite guests, choose a topic that is either in the headlines or needs to be talked about. We've talked about recently literacy rates in South Dakota, Indigenous identity, um, gosh, all kinds of things. I gotta look at my list. We're going to be talking about Lakota Star Knowledge and its relationship to NASA and STEM education. I'm really excited about that one. It's our trust in our institutions. There's a growing lack of trust in everything, each other, the government, the corporations, everything. So, where are these things coming from and why, and what do we do about it? That's the big thing is we have this information, what are you going to do with it? We also have the America's 250th birthday, the semi-quincentennial coming up. And we are going to be focusing on its impacts in South Dakota. Why does it make a difference in South Dakota? South Dakota is not 250 years old. But everything that has happened in 250 years has happened on Ochedi Shakoni land. And that's what we're going to focus on. Those types of things where, how did we get here? When you think about how things like the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868, you look at the damming of the Missouri River, at the profound impacts that all of that has had on South Dakota, not just its people, but its land. There's just so much to look at. And my favorite thing that I'm working on is in 2026, 2027, we're going to be doing, the Humanities Council is going to be sponsoring a Smithsonian traveling exhibition. And this one, we've done two previously. This one is called Americans. And the premise of it is that the United States was built at great cost to its Native American people. And so I'm really excited to be working on that with some amazing scholars that I hear their names and I'm just like, like, am I actually going to talk to this person? Are you kidding? So most people know who Vine Deloria Jr. is. I get to talk to his son. So I'm like, what? But it's part of the research, and it's when you're researching one thing, it seems like it always leads you into another something. Like, okay, so now we know this, but why did that happen? And so it's limitless. You can go as far as you want to when you're doing research.
Yeah. Very cool. How does your research look? Like, what does a day-to-day look like for you guys?
Well, a lot of my research is still up here. What I found is I'm always thinking about things like how am I related to everything around me, and how does the world work around me. I observe a lot. People, again, it's not surprising. I'm a very quiet person sometimes, like most of the time, but it's not because I don't have anything going on up here. It's because I'm just taking everything in, right? Listening to people, what they have to say. And I'm very careful in terms of what I try to temper it and everything. So to me, being a researcher is being an observer. So you're not only going out there into the field, for instance, for this Bison project, right? We're not just going out in the field and pointing, putting points on a map, right? But that is part of it. And a lot of reading.
Yeah.
And it's just an exploration, right? Because you never know what you're going to come up with. New articles, new people to talk to. Earlier at the beginning of this year, I went down to Broomfield in Denver to attend a conference or a gathering with a group called Indigenous Led, and this is the group that's funding this current research project I'm working on. And I met so many people there that are also passionate about bison and how we need to bring it back, right? And we're at a point that we no one has ownership of bison, right?
Right.
And so another aspect that I'm really interested in this is just talking to people, talking to ranchers that also have a relationship to the land, because we can't deny that, right? We can't say that indigenous people are the only people that have a relationship to the land. And then starting from there, where are those similarities, right? And that's how you build a relationship. Um, I know I'm probably going off on all these different directions. But a couple of weeks ago, Faith Spotted Eagle was here at SDSU, and one thing that she said that really resonated with me was we have to integrate indigenous or native thought with Western thought. We don't have a choice, and she's right. Right? We can kind of live parallel lives, and our lives won't cross, but that bridge is long gone. Right? Our lives are all mixed up together, and part of that, kind of going back to this idea of listening, it really is just being quiet and listening to people, listening to the world around you.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I agree too that Indigenous and Western, I think it would benefit everybody to collaborate,
And it's funny you said that, because when you think about when colonization happened, when settlers came here, the indigenous peoples were here for thousands of years, and they were making it work pretty darn good. So there's a lot to be learned. We need to bring it together, because that's the only way we're going to get anywhere. We're not going to survive. The land won't survive if we don't figure it out. I love the work you're doing. So.
Well, the previously you had mentioned America was built on the backs of indigenous people, partly, and that's important to understand when students go into school, and this is, I mean, I guess I haven't been in school for years, or elementary school for years and years,
Yeah.
right? But we start American history kind of at the Revolutionary War, right? Nothing happened before then, or you might hear a little bit about Native American, the Pilgrims. There you go. And Native people were talked about as being in the past, right? That they don't exist today. And if we just switch that and realize that American history is only a small part of the history of this land, right? So when you put that in perspective, America, or North America, the states, however you want to call them, is not the end all be all.
Right.
It is temporary. It's not going to be here forever. And this land is going to be here forever. So we need, or not forever, but it's going to be here long after humans.
So we already talked a little bit about what the purpose of your guys' research was. Could you maybe explain, from a researcher's perspective, why research in general is so important?
If you don't have people looking into things and researching as such, and just digging to find out what the truth of everything, you can be swayed by anything. How are we going to learn how to make Western culture and indigenous culture come together? How are we going to interweave those if we don't know what they are? You can't fix things if you don't know what's wrong.
Right.
So, and we just can grow so much from it. I know just in the time that I've had the opportunity to research for my research is more, I'm digging into stuff and looking at things, and also interviewing. But I'll do the actual digging into the literature part before I talk to. I said go to the source. So, if I want to know, I often say when I'm doing an interview, a research interview, that I try not to ask a question that I don't already know part of the answer to first. But I want to know the real story. Like, I can look up anything in a book and I can get any information out of the book, but I want the real story. I want to know what the whole truth is. And a lot of it with the research that I'm doing with the indigenous elders is that we're losing them, and if we don't hold the information from them and respect that process and just appreciate and honor and respect everything that they know, we're going to lose that. Well, we won't have it. It's gone.
Right.
And you can't get that back. So it's like, I mean, obviously I'm a passionate researcher, but there's nothing that I wouldn't research. I mean, I would really literally look into anything that interests me. And it probably happens more often than it should. But, like, down the rabbit hole again. But I think that, as what Joshua said, there's a turn away from science. And we've turned away a lot from facts. But facts matter. And if we don't keep digging for the facts, there won't be any to debate. So, then what?
Yeah. There's that saying, if you don't stand for anything, you fall for everything, right? Yep.
Yeah. And I'll just echo what Stacy had said. It's just about being informed, right? So not only being informed for yourself, but also informing other people around you. Might get some pushback a little bit. I mean, I think you're going to see a lot of pushback, in the next few years. But it's also important to understand that we've been in these positions before. We've been through a pandemic before, and if you look at the history, a lot of the fears that we had during COVID were present 100 years ago with the influenza. I think it was an epidemic. I think that's what. Anyway, one of the two. So what we're seeing again is it new in human history, but we need to take those lessons and that research that we've done and apply them, right? Otherwise, we're going to fall back into this passivity that doesn't help anybody.
Yeah. I think from my amateur research perspective, I think research is important just because what you don't know, people fear. So I think it's so important to let everybody know so that there's no fear, because fear is scary. I mean, people turn violent, and I just think eliminating fear is the biggest part of research for me. So.
Right.
And fear combined with ignorance is terrifying. So, I mean, if you can teach one person what you know, what you've worked hard to find out, and you can enlighten somebody else with that, they're not ignorant anymore, unless they choose to be. But they know.
Well, one thing too, I mean, I would also say that fear is okay, because that fear is going to prompt you to, or should prompt you to understand what you fear a little bit more, right? And that's what we do, right? It's kind of, I mean, I love roller coasters, right? But when I'm standing in that line, I am terrified, right? I get on it and I do it,
Right.
And then I go, I survived.
That was nothing.
So that's what we should strive for, right? Fear, if you're fearing, if you have that feeling of fear, that's fine, right? But kind of try to understand where it's coming from, mm-hmm. And part of that obviously is research.
Right. Yeah, I agree, but I will not be looking up spiders anytime soon.
Yeah. And now,
so I'd like to get a little bit more specific here and talk about Indigenous research. So is there anything else you have to add about why Indigenous research specifically is so important?
For me, it just goes back to what I said. Like, they were, Indigenous peoples were here really successfully making it work for thousands of years, living relatively peacefully. The land was protected and sustained, and then what happened? Right. Then they got hit with, colonization. Settlers brought in diseases and conflict, and we need to go back to that. If we want this land to be here thousands more years, and we want to be here, then, we're going to have to do something about it.
Well, if you have Musk's way, we're just going to colonize Mars, right?
Yeah.
Like, yes.
We're going to forget Earth.
Yeah.
Just go to a new planet.
We'll just find a new one.
And do it all over again, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, we're so blessed to be on a planet that sustains life the way it does. I mean, we don't know what's out there. So, you know what, we got to take care of what's here. because this is our one shot. We don't get another shot. I'm not going to Mars because I don't think I'd survive the flight. But I'm just saying. I'm not sure the rocket would make it, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, then I always go back to this. I'm a huge nerd, so this phrase is always in my mind. The needs of the many are greater than the needs of the few. Mr. Spock says that in Star Trek too. And that's really what it is. When you think about the American dream, it's individualism, right? It's what can I do to do better for myself, my family, my future. There is no what can I do better for our future, and that's really the fundamental difference between Western thought and indigenous thought is that everything that you do should benefit your community. Yes,
we are all related.
We are all related. Everything that we do is for community, and I think we would all be better off if we work towards that. A lot of times, I see people complaining all the time, or I hear them complaining all the time that things aren't changing, things aren't the way I want them to be. They may not be, then get involved.
Right.
And that's what I was going to, Faith Spotted Eagle had mentioned that everybody, back in the day, everybody had a role in society, in the community.
Yep.
And if you didn't, you weren't part of that community. And not that you were banned or ostracized, or maybe you were ostracized, but you wouldn't be part of that community for very long, right? Because people are going to recognize that you're not pulling your weight, right? And it's not that, yes, everybody has personal freedoms. And so it's not that we're impinging on personal freedoms, but it's also that you have a personal responsibility to society. Right? You go back to that social contract idea, right? You don't exist alone. You exist in a world full of people. And what we do here in Brookings, South Dakota is going to affect people across the ocean, right? Even though it seems I don't even know how long, many miles away.
It's a little farther than down the street, but
it's going to affect those people, right? So,
they call the butterfly effect.
Exactly.
Like when a butterfly flaps its wings in Asia, it causes a hurricane here. It's like everything is a wave. It affects everybody. There you go.
So when you think about this idea of the American dream and individualism, again, I mean that's at a large scale too. I mean, look at what's happening politically. Where we have an administration that thinks that America is the center of the world, right? And we're just quickly discovering that that is not the case.
Ethnocentrism is alive and well.
So, the faster we can get into this idea that we are all responsible and accountable to one another, the better off we'll be. And research is a large part of that, right? Whether you think of research in an academic sense or just research in terms of, quickly typing a question into Google, right? We live in the age of Google, so.
What are the struggles behind Indigenous research?
You're constantly being discredited.
Yeah.
and I mean that with as much love as I can give. First off, I would not call myself a Native researcher. I am Native American, but I'm also a researcher, right? I think there are people who can confidently call themselves a Native researcher or an Indigenous researcher, but that's not me. I do abide by these tenets of Indigenous research methodologies, but that's because it does well for everybody, right? It's not that we're sitting here and saying Indigenous research is the best. We need to follow it, right? First off, Indigenous cultures don't own values. All cultures have values. Mm-hmm. So if we recognize that we have those values, and then we can move forward in a good way. Specifically for me, I think there was a thought there that kind of got left out, but I have been discredited. I have by elders saying that, well, what you're doing isn't really, Native American or anything. And then, as an, I listen to them and I respect their opinion. I don't agree with it though, right?
Sure.
Because we all don't, none of us grow up the same way, and it's true for indigenous individuals as well, or native individuals. We're all going to have different experiences. It's important that we recognize that. We can still have that identity of being a Native American or Lakota, right? But we just, I just get so frustrated that when I think about this, because we again, I go back to this thought of just merging those two thought processes together. We are not saying that, again, we are not saying Indigenous research is the best, but we have an opportunity to take what's best in both of those thought processes, those worldviews, and put them together.
It doesn't have to be either or.
Exactly.
It shouldn't be either or.
No, it should not.
For my part, with the discreditation that Joshua was talking about, I, as a non-Indigenous woman from New Jersey, my biggest thing in approaching Indigenous research in the way that I do it has been trust. And you know what? I 100% understand. The Indigenous peoples have no reason to trust a non-Indigenous person coming and asking questions that, this is sacred knowledge. These are things that, this isn't, just whatever. And I know that there's been instances, quite a few, where non-Indigenous people have gone into Indigenous communities and on the premise of research, got the information they wanted on the promise that they're going to do something to help, and they don't. So you know what? Why would an Indigenous elder, especially, trust me? So, but I take on that role. I get it. So it's my role to earn that trust and show my respect and my appreciation and my profound just thankfulness. That they're even having allowing me the opportunity, because really I haven't earned it. I just want to help. But those are hollow words without action. Everybody says they want to help. They want to help themselves. That's where it comes from. So I've had a little bit of pushback, but you can't boil the ocean. Small steps.
And that's a good point in that trust. And I say this over and over again, telling Blue in the face. Just be part of the community. Show up. I was part of a board once who they brought up the question: how do we make inroads with our Native American community in Rapid City, where I'm from? And I just, I flat out said, go to their events, go to their wachipis, right? You can go; they're open to the public, right? These are things that we like to share with people. Go to art shows, do all the things, because once you establish yourself within that community, you understand them a little bit more. You start to understand protocols a little bit more, and then you can start to gain that trust and realize that, or they will realize that you're not just here for yourself. You're not just helicoptering in. You're actually investing the time. And this is one thing that you get on my soapbox. Building relationships is work. And in the academic world, it's not, right? They don't consider that to be work, but it is work. Sitting down with someone or just hearing them out, that is, I don't know how else to say that. It's work, especially when you're working with
real effort.
Exactly. When you're working with Native American communities, you have to do that work. Otherwise, you're not going to. What are you going to do? You're going to publish things that have nothing to do with your community. You're going to get tenure, great. But what are you doing for your
Right, and that's the trust piece that I was talking about. Yeah. Well, and especially since Indigenous, especially the elders, it's oral tradition. They're not going to write it down for you. I know one of the scholars that I'm working with pretty frequently now. Is very well respected. He's very, very intelligent man with a lot of information. And he actually came to Brookings from West River to meet with me. And he said his first question for me is, "Why are you doing this?" And that's what I mean. I get it, yeah. And so then I told him what my idea was for the program I was working on. He said, "Well, do your homework." And I said, well, I can look in a book and I can find all the information that's been whitewashed into what's going in the history books and everything else, but I want to go to the source. I want it from you. And so me doing my homework is talking to you, So, I mean, but there's, there's that whole, I don't know if I believe you or not. And I totally get it. I do. And the onus is on me. It's on me to say, not to say please trust me, but I'm going to earn it. I'm going to earn it from you. I will prove it to you. And now, I mean, he and I now are kind of like pen pals. I mean, he sends me stuff, and I had another scholar who was all on board to do a program with me, and then she had second thoughts about it, and she said, you should be doing this. You should be talking to these people, and why aren't you consulting this particular group of elders? And she is one of those elders, and I said that's why I'm reaching out to you, But it's more. I feel in a lot of ways that I have to I wouldn't say prove myself, but prove my authenticity. Like this is the real deal. I really am here because I care, not because I want a story.
That's really really important. I mean, that is one thing that I will take issue with. Again, I get it why elders are so protective.
Absolutely.
Right? But at the same time, if you want people to engage with the culture, you are going to have to share. You can't keep it to yourself. You have to share that information to the next generation so they have it to share to their kids or to their grandkids, right? And it's really it's a two-way street, right? They're they're getting something and you're trying to get something as well, right? But it is that back and forth, that relationship that's really important. So I think what Stacy is talking about is you have to be persistent.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because there are a lot of people who would get that email and say, "Okay, right. I'm done. I'm done."
Well, and I actually got that. Like you've heard that people say, "I'm tired of old." You hear old white men tell me what I'm supposed to do. Well, you know what? I think a lot of Indigenous people are tired of white people wanting to know and not doing their homework. And one of the things like I've done with when I've sent out emails or approached people, usually I introduce myself by email first and explain the research that I'm working on, and I'm very upfront with them. Like, you know what, mistakes are going to happen. I'm coming to you because I don't know, but I'm hoping that you being willing to work with me on this will will catch me from making that mistake and help me redirect myself because we're on this journey together. I mean, we're all on this journey together. And I always say, my dad used to say, you can't boil the ocean, baby steps. But then Dr. Chuck Woodard met with me and this elder that I was talking about. And he said, I think it was Elizabeth Copeland that had told him, once you choose a direction, make deep tracks. And just by that is like, once you choose it, decide you're going to do this, don't stop. Be persistent. You might have to earn it. You will, and that's okay. If you really care about what you're doing, you won't have a problem with that. It's actually kind of rewarding. It's like I've learned. Okay, like I said, I'm from the East Coast. I claim no background in Indigenous culture. And when I came to South Dakota and I went to South Dakota State for my undergrad, I was a sociology major, obviously, and there was that American Indian component. Everybody has to take a class. And I took a class with Dr. Donna Hess. And it was called, I think, I don't remember the name of it now, but it was like very school American Indian 101 or something like that. And this is a long time ago.
Learn to be Indian.
Everything you wanted to know about Native Americans were afraid to ask. That's actually a book by Anton Troyer. It's amazing. But anyway, I was just blown away, like completely just instantaneously fell in love. Because I thought, wow, why am I just now hearing about this? And so with this research I'm working on now for the Smithsonian exhibition I was talking about called Americans, it talks about Thanksgiving, the real story of Thanksgiving. It talks about Trail of Tears. It talks about mascots and stereotypes. Like Dr. John Little at USD, he and I are going to do a Humanities Cafe episode called Everywhere and Nowhere, which, you see mascots, you see, stereotypes and this cultural appropriation. American Indian stuff is everywhere, but nobody acknowledges that these people are still here. And there's so many books out there now that are like, there's one entitled that I'm reading, I think by Roxanne Ortiz, called All the Real Indians Are Dead. That's the title of the book. But that's what people think. Like, moving here, I had no idea. Like, I didn't learn anything about Native American history. So I'm going to do my little part to fix that if I can. A little bit of time. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't have a lot of years left, so I got to get on this.
I am coming from South Dakota, and I'm sure part of this is my fault. I know in primary school, high school, I was not the academic person that I am now. So I know part of it is my fault, but I also think, especially living in South Dakota, there is not enough Indigenous history taught in school, and not just Indigenous history, but also like where they are now. Like they're just not brought up. My categories research or sorry, math, right? And they'll give you 20 examples a day about science and physics and how, just an example to show students how this matters today. Not a single one of them has anything to do with Indigenous history. And even going to college, I've gone through calculus 1 now, and not a single example has been brought up about Indigenous anything, which I think is so important. And that's part of the research that I want to do, because why not,
Right. Well, we have it's kind of, we exist within the world of being invisible and hyper visible, right? So normally we don't really people don't really consider us to be a part of the world.
Everywhere and nowhere,
yeah. And but at the same time, when it comes to, I need to incorporate something about Native Americans into my class. Who's the first person you go to, right? Because then it's like you're thrust into like the spotlight, and well, that's fine in a certain extent. It shouldn't be that way. People should have this basic knowledge for themselves, and part of that is the primary school. I bought a book in Rapid, and it's an old. I think it was 1901 that this history textbook came out, U.S. history, and there's a whole chapter on Indians. That's what it's called, the chapter called Indians, and it flat out says, the savages of America in that textbook. So that's what we're fighting against. And yeah.
Well, and it's not the same, but see it as akin to, I'm Italian, and everybody thinks, okay, I need to learn how to make lasagna. It's like, you need to know about the mob. So it's like, who's the token Native American that you know? And it shouldn't be that way. This should just be general knowledge. And there's so much amazing stuff to learn. And like with STEM education, when I have that upcoming program with Lakota Star Knowledge, Caitlin Bordeaux is a STEM educator here in South Dakota who just finished a NASA internship. I mean, they have sought out Native American research, and I mean, right now, of course, it's being whitewashed as well, but there's something to it. I mean, when I think about like what I'm learning, the few, I learn something every day, but how the winter count and the symbolism of the star quilt, and there's so much beautiful stuff that nobody really knows about. They just see it. Oh, it's a quilt. No. It's a lot more than that. Oh, it's a teepee. I mean, I'll be honest. When I moved here from New Jersey, my friend Lynn, she was like, why I haven't gotten a letter from you? Why? And I'm like, well, the Pony Express takes like 2 weeks, Lynn. And she's like, really? And of course, and they, I got, do American Indians still live in teepees? And I'm like, only in the summer. I mean, I joked around about it. But then I'm like, I really shouldn't do that. It's my role to say, no. But, you got to find levity in the situation sometimes because the ignorance is real. Yeah. I mean, and it's not intentional. It's just they've never been taught, and so it goes back to what I was saying before. When you know better, you do better.
Right. And not even that, not only that they've not been taught, what they've been taught is wrong.
Yes, whitewashed.
Right. Going back a little bit to what you were saying before, Joshua, about joining the community, putting yourself out there. Do you have any advice for those? I know personally, I've talked to you about this before. We have an American Indian Student Center in South Dakota State University, and it's open to everybody. And it's a beautiful building, stained glass. It's amazing. And I've had classes there for a whole year now, but I still feel as if I shouldn't go into that common area that is in there. Not because I've not been invited. I've been invited over and over and over again, but I just feel like I'm intruding. And so, what advice can you give me for that?
Well, first, you're not intruding. You were invited, so that means you are welcome anytime. Right?
Yes.
That building is, yes, it is for all students, and I think sometimes people kind of self-police themselves and say, oh, that's the American Indian Student Center. I don't know anything about that, so I'm going to stay away from that. Right? But it's a welcoming space. Everybody should be welcomed, or should be using that, right? Or at least just going in there and seeing what a beautiful space it is. First of all, I just want to say everybody belongs. I would venture to say that a lot of people on campus who are uncomfortable going into that building are probably also uncomfortable stepping foot onto a reservation. And there's no difference, right? You can stand on one side and it's America or South Dakota, and you stand on this, and it's a reservation, right? There's no physical boundary between them, right? We are all part of this community together. Having confidence in that, I think, is important. But coming from someone who struggled with having confidence in themselves for a long time, I get that. Part of it, though, is you have to be willing to take that risk. You might be told no. You might be pushed out. I certainly have at times, right? And then I sit in my room in despair, like, is this really what I want to do for my life? But as you said, like, I've already stepped my foot in the door. I have to keep going.
Yep.
Right? Otherwise, the community is going to say, "Who is this person?"
And not only that, they're going to say, "See, I knew it." Yep, just another white person now, and I get it. Oh boy. But then I think I can relate to that a little bit, what you're talking about, Allison, because I sometimes feel guilt. I'm second generation Italian American, my family wasn't here. But I have, for lack of a better word, it's the title of the book, white guilt. Because I know the generational trauma that exists because of people with the same color skin as me. So I feel in a lot of ways that I don't deserve to go into a sacred space. When I think about what Joshua was saying about reservations, that's a sovereign nation, but it's still the same land. It's all geography. But I think if you go into a place like that is sacred and that we have reverence for, but we feel like we're intruding on, it's going to show on you that your intentions are good. You just might have to give it a little time. And it'll be totally worth it, I promise.
And from my perspective, Allison, you've been part of the community, right? You've taken classes there. You've attended events, right? So you should have that confidence, right? And you're in class with Brooke and Mandy, and they've accepted you. So it's again, I get it. We've all been there, like not wanting to get into a space that we might not necessarily belong. But again, we all belong, right? That building was made specifically for American Indian Student Services. But again, I keep going back to this idea that Lakota, it's not. It's more of a lifestyle, I want to say, right? So it's not that you have sort of blood quantum that you're considered Lakota or whatever. Well, legally, right?
Yeah. They're not going to check at the door.
But it's more of it's lifestyle, right? You're internalizing those values and that worldview, and you're walking through life with those values. You're walking the red road. That's what they say,
Yep.
right? And then it's work, but if you show that you adhere to those values, you have respect for them, and you may self-police yourself. Maybe there's events that you may not go to, right? And that's perfectly fine. But it takes patience, and a lot of people are impatient, especially today. People just want that right now.
Yeah. You can't just Google everything.
No.
Right.
I hope that. Did I?
Well, yeah. Even through your approaches, you're going in humble and wanting to learn, and that shows. When somebody's just coming in blustering like, "Oh, I'm here because I'm going to learn everything." I mean, nobody likes that. It doesn't matter what environment it is. Nobody likes that. So I think it's all in the approach that you take. Like I said, when I approach the elders and the scholars that I'm trying to work with, I tell them up front, I know I'm going to make mistakes. Please don't hold it against me. I'm trying. I'm the underdog here. Not in that. That's probably a really bad word to use, but I'm the one who needs to learn something here. So I'm taking that upon myself, and I hope that you can teach me and lead me on the red road. Show me where I need to go. Tell me if I'm doing something wrong. Please tell me. If I said something disrespectful, please tell me. I don't mean it to be disrespectful. I don't mean questions to be disrespectful. But on the same side, I don't want to sugarcoat it either. I want the truth, and sometimes the truth hurts a lot, especially with the grievances that exist between the colonizers and indigenous peoples. I mean, that's something we have to live with.
How would you approach an elder, for example? Would you continue just showing up to these events and cross your fingers and hope maybe that they notice you, or how would you navigate a situation like that?
I always introduce myself because, again, yes, I hold reverence for elders, right? And I don't necessarily want to intrude on their space, but at the same time, I want to know them, right? Making sure that you're seen, and I know that seems self-serving, but you don't have to be. You don't have to make a spectacle of yourself. Like, look at me, I'm here.
Hey.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, there's something to be said about silence and just listening. Just sit there and take it in, and elders will notice you. They will see you. Another thing I want to kind of touch on that Stacy had mentioned was this idea that you're going to make mistakes, right? Or one of the things that I'm seeing a shift in is this attitude. So right now we have elders who are very kind of standoffish, and again, rightfully so because of what they've experienced or their families experienced. The younger generation is seeing that and not necessarily wanting to embody that as they're growing up or maturing, I guess. So that is getting better. We are still at a point now where we see this in language a lot, where elders will correct people on the pronunciation. All fine and dandy, right? I want to make sure that I'm pronouncing Lakota words correctly, but they're going to go a step beyond that and scold you. And then what does that do? That shuts people down, and people don't want to continue on with that. And by virtue of the younger generation of indigenous leaders, they see that and they don't want to continue on with that. So it is getting better. Again, progress is slow and incremental, right? Nothing's going to change overnight.
Can't boil the ocean.
Yes, I know you asked me that question in class the last time that you were here in Brookings. What would I do if a elder yelled at me and cry? It's the only response that I can offer.
I certainly cried. I did.
Well, and the funny thing is, when I'm sitting here thinking about elders, is I've reached out to our whole looking horse and Dwayne Hollowhorn Bear and people that I would just I think I would pass out if I actually ever got a chance to speak to them because I hold them in such high esteem. But what an opportunity! That when you ask that question, a good question. Because I don't even I don't know. I have reached out primarily through email. I'll send an email first, and if they don't have email, then obviously I'll call first. But I always try to send an email to say, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm working on. Let them stew in that for a little while, see what they really want to think about it, and then I'll either send a follow up email or I'll make a phone call and say, I sent you an email a few weeks ago. Thank you for taking the time out to talk to me. This is what I'm doing. And I mean, yeah, I've gotten pushback. I said, and I expect it. But I'm not giving up because what's why? And I haven't done anything. I'm excited for your future. I think you're doing good things.
Thank you.
It takes a lot of courage. So it comes from here.
Yeah, I'm excited. I really hope that I can do something good with my research. The goal is to make a book, a how-to for teachers so that we can all do better. So.
You could title it Make Deep Tracks.
Yeah.
Just
Don't
remember
boil
that.
the ocean. You can't boil the ocean.
So once you decide which way you're going, make deep tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing I just want to encourage you, right? It's obvious the conversations I've had with you, the classes that I've had with you, that you are not doing this for yourself, right? You are doing it to better the community, and I think I know I've said this before, but I'll say it again: the more we can look at one another as humans and realize that we have more in common than we have. I know that sounds cliche, but it's actually true. And I think one of the reasons why there's we see this attack on the humanities, and I don't understand it. And the reason I don't understand it is because that's literally the one thing that connects us all,
Yep.
right? And along with what Stacy is saying is people who believe that it's incumbent on them to express it, right? You can't expect people to come to you. So
now more than ever, it's important,
exactly,
to stand up and stand up for the people who don't have your privilege. There's when I used to work at the high school, and I had a bulletin board outside my room, and it says, we're all like a box of crayons. We're all different, but we all live in the same box. Mm-hmm. So if crayons can do it, I mean, come on. Come on. I'm not sure which color I'd be, but I'd probably be the bright pink one. You'd be the bright pink one. Yeah, you're bright pink one. But it's just the divisiveness right now. It's just so sad, but it makes it so people who believe in diversity and equity and inclusion. I use those three words. Yes, I did. Who believe in the human experience. I mean, you have to say something. Like my son used to say, "Don't talk about it, be about it." You can talk till you're blue in the face, but if you're not doing anything, I want to be able to tell my granddaughter when she says, "Grandma, what did you do?" I want to say I stood up. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say, "Oh, we're all in this together."
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're not going to stop doing that work.
Mm-hmm.
That work was going on well before that phrase became popular.
Yep.
That phrase kind of came about, and honestly, I'd be interested to see where that phrase had actually come from, because I didn't even hear it until maybe 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm sure it was around before then. But then it kind of blew up. It was like the new it thing.
Yeah.
and great, people want to engage with that, but that work has been going on forever.
Yes.
Right. It just didn't start. And I think it's really telling when you get an administration in that says, "Oh, no more DEI," and then you have companies like Target that say, "Okay,
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, so you were just giving people lip service.
Yes.
You didn't actually believe in that,
Yep.
right?
And Coke too, I believe.
What?
Coke.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. So, it just shows exactly where their thinking was.
Mm-hmm.
They just wanted a lot of these programs just want to tie themselves to what's popular.
Right.
And not just popular, but easy. It's just easy to act like with DEI stepping into the limelight is because groups who've been historically marginalized for a very long time have finally found the courage and the opportunity to step up and say, "Hey, I belong here." And unfortunately, doing away with DEI programming and subjects of that nature just puts everybody back down into that pit. Like I don't understand it at all, because I mean, what 80 something percent of us are immigrants. Like, unless you are an American Indian, you are an immigrant. Somewhere along the line, you're an immigrant. So I don't understand. The color of your skin shouldn't mean. I mean, obviously, it shouldn't mean anything. But I really, and it's not just it's not just race and ethnicity. It's ability or other ability. It's othering. Again, which is a sociological thing, where if you make one group seem smaller than you to make yourself feel better, eventually you're going to be that other. You will eventually be in that list, and then what? So you have to stand up.
Do you think that the exclusion of DEI now is going to be a hindrance to this research, or do you think it will make more people want to research these topics?
Depends. I think if you're in the club that wants to do it, you're going to do it more. And I'm just more fired up now than I was before. But I know, isn't that hard to believe? I'm excited. What? But I think for those who aren't, it goes back to like what you were saying about these companies just folding and saying, okay, I mean, for people that didn't want to be involved in it at all, this is their excuse to not even participate. For those of us who believe in it and believe in the human experience, the full human experience, I'm just going to fight harder, and I'm not afraid to do it. I'm not even afraid to say it. So it's going to take a lot more of us.
I don't think it's gonna. I mean, it might shift a little bit, right? But I also think that because it's now apparently quote unquote against the law because of executive order or executive decree. Again, kind of going back to this idea that Americans are voyeurs. They're interested in these things that you're not supposed to talk about out loud.
Mm-hmm.
So, if anything, this ban
makes people more curious.
Exactly.
Like, what's this all about? What's all this about?
Yes.
Let me just go research it and find out.
Like strict parents make sneaky kids, right?
I can confirm that.
I can as well. Yes. I may or may not resemble that remark.
Yeah, but I was just thinking about how the South Dakota Humanities Council did that one video about blood quantum, and you guys had to change the title because it was no longer allowed.
And I actually, before that, had the week after this previous inauguration was the segment we were going to do on DEI, and I was told to squash it. So I think there's a lot of skies falling. But the farther we get out from it, I think more of us are realizing that, if we, it's going to sound sort of cliche, but if we stop what we're doing, they win. Hate wins. Hate is not going to win on my watch. So I just want to fight harder than I did before.
In case, to your point too, how many people did we have in the Native identity?
Oh, she's 37, I think. Yeah. Which are you? Yeah.
There was
52.
There was 52 there. So there was a lot more than that. So
it was a whole college classroom.
There's an interest in that.
Yeah.
Right? And, I often wonder how South Dakota is going to navigate this, because on one hand, you have an administration that is saying, like, no, we can't treat anybody like they're different from one another, right? We treat them all the same. I kind of believe that for as much as they're trying not to become a communist nation, we are becoming a communist nation.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's the, and I lost my thought. Sorry.
But it's
I am
like,
so sorry.
I just, when I think about, like, what, 8% of our population is American Indian, but 21% of the land in South Dakota is sovereign land. So there's going to have to be a reckoning here somewhere because, I mean, we can't just keep going forward with, okay, we're just going to keep forgetting that, indigenous peoples in this state were wrongfully, their land, not just South Dakota, but I mean, the Supreme Court said this, they ruled a long time ago now that, hey, the Black Hills is not the federal government's purview, but, we're still debating it. There's no debate.
Yeah.
Supreme Court ruled that yes, the U.S. did break the treaty.
They stole it.
The unfortunate thing is that they assigned monetary
Exactly.
damages instead of giving the land back. And this was in the 1980s, so I can understand. I mean, what are you going to do? Like, pack everybody up and go?
Yeah.
Um,
But that's like selling your church,
exactly. Right.
And then that would require, I believe, that they couldn't pursue it any further. If they took the money for it, they could pursue a reacquisition of the land.
Exactly. So I mean, that money is still sitting there. I mean, it's well over $1 billion right now.
Which it should be more because of the mineral rights and everything else.
Exactly. But what's happening in, I remember what's going on. See, I just need to keep talking and then I remember, or listen to people and then I remember what's going on in Washington is so antithetical to what South Dakota is about, right? There is respect, at least at the, I guess I shouldn't, in general, there is respect for Native communities, right? In terms of our representatives, right? They understand. You talk to, Congressman Johnson or Senators Thune and Rounds. They understand that Native American, the Oceti-Sakowee, are important to this area, right? But again, that administration is not supportive of that, right? So there's going to be a reckoning at some point, and I don't know what that is. I hope South Dakota's on the right side, and I mean, we have a third of the land, so I don't know how they can ignore us.
Well, and it's funny because I'm going to be going to Washington, D.C. in May to meet with the Smithsonian Institution about the Museum on Main Street exhibition I was talking about, Americans. And they sent me an email and said, hey, we might ask you to speak. I'm like, what do you want me to speak about? But there's so many other states, other humanities councils who are having a really hard time forging communication and an open relationship with their indigenous populations. It's not just a South Dakota thing. I mean, if anything, I would say the Oceti-Sakowee is much more open to sharing than most people think they would. It's just, I mean, it's just, I'm so honored that we live in South Dakota, and I don't know, I'm totally enamored by everything I learned. Every single day I learn something new, and it's like, wow, how come nobody else knows this? And so, yeah, look, you should write a book. I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to write a book because that's not my story to tell, but I think it needs to be shared, and if my role at the Humanities Council means I get to do that, then maybe let's keep going. Because I have been, in full disclosure, I have been working on a program called Knowledge Keepers. And but the intent was kind of along the lines of what we do with the Humanities Cafe program in the same time frame and stuff like that. But it was like a program that I'm hoping to get started, and where I would invite in Indigenous elders, Indigenous scholars to talk about these things. The 9 sovereign nations. Let's talk about each one of them. Let's talk about the Oceti-Sakowee and how it came to be, and let's talk about Wachipi etiquette, and let's talk about because there's so many questions that white folks have about indigenous culture, but who are you going to ask? Or let's just, we'll just look at that. That's a cool mascot. No, that is not a cool mascot. That issue. What, I hear, and I've read, in my research that people say, well, it's honoring indigenous people by calling the team the Chiefs and the Braves. And Dr. John Little is got an amazing documentary out that I've watched several times over, and it's not an honor. And when you think about when we talked about blood quantum, what did you say? The only three groups that have to prove their blood quantum are
Horses, dogs, and Native Americans.
yeah. There's something wrong with that. So
Yeah.
The issue is though with that, and I, it's because there's benefits tied to it.
oh sure. Yeah.
Because it's so strange how race is interpreted here in the States because 100 years ago, if you had one family member that was African American, it could have been generations ago.
One drop of blood.
You were black, right? Yep. Then it's the opposite with Native Americans, right? It's that if you don't have enough blood, you're not.
Well, and it's funny because working on this Americans exhibition, one of the topic areas is Pocahontas, and believe it or not, it's a whole section of the thing. But when back in the day when she was famous and everything, everybody wanted to be related to her. Everybody's oh yeah, Pocahontas is part of my family and blah blah blah. But then it was like when it came to the Allotment Act and all that stuff, like oh no, I don't have any native blood. No, that's not me. No. And it's just the politicization of ancestry is like bizarre because it's not with every ethnic group or racial group that happens. It's just and like now with the whole birthright citizenship thing, because American Indians are part of sovereign nations, then they're not American, but they were here first. So I mean, it's just bizarre how everything's just fallen the way it has.
I think all of you European dissenters or descendants from Europe are just part of our nation.
Totally. I'm signing up for sure.
This is awesome.
I mean, there's a million and one things we could talk about, probably for a million and one more hours, but I just think the biggest piece for you with wanting to pursue the research and write your book is persistence and understanding that it's not going to be easy, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
All the best stuff is. Rarity is the easy stuff. What's needed.
Right.
If it was that easy, everybody would be doing it. So
Shucks.
darn it.
There you go. So I was going to talk benefits thing, right?
So, benefits.
I mean, there was a point in time. I mean, you see, Elizabeth Warren got pushed back with this, right? Because she identified that she was an ancestor of Native American lineage. Turns out that was not the case. But if you think about it, she was, and dates I don't really keep up on, but I imagine that this was probably in the 70s or 80s when someone could claim that, and no one was going to double check, right?
Right.
What I think is great now is we are kind of rising up, and we have a collective voice now, and we can point out like, hey, that's not right, right?
Right.
So there, even though we are still in a fraught position, it has been improving, right? Progress, as I said, takes time, right? People have to ask themselves, do you want perfection or do you want progress? Because you're never going to have perfection. The point is that we need to move forward, acknowledge what happened in the past, don't forget about it. Don't erase the past, apparently, because I mean, we celebrate history here in America, right? Whether it's Confederacy or whatever.
Well, celebrate convenient history here.
There we go. That's a good term for it. Acknowledge that, and we move forward. As Faith Spotted Eagle said, that we have no choice but to move forward, and this is the world that we're in. We can't change it. And I tell this to students all the time, that decolonization sounds good, but even if all the Europeans or people with European descent disappeared, the effects of colonization will still be here.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, if you look at India, South Africa, the locations that were colonized, they are no longer colonized, right? But those effects are still there, right? It profoundly changed the course of and communities.
Well, even just with just escaping the generational trauma. Even if every non-indigenous person, like you said, just wasn't here anymore, that doesn't do away with everything that hurt. It's still there. So it's our role as non-indigenous people to make amends in whatever way we can. And there's so many people I've heard say, "Well, it wasn't my relatives." No, but so what? We're all in this together. Everybody's got a role in this. And it's yeah, I'm just every day it's a new something that we're not supposed to talk about, or I don't know. Oh boy, like yeah, and if that, if from my perspective with my research and in my programming, if I take that step back one time, I've dishonored myself. That's not who I am. So, and I'm pretty ornery. So, yeah. Yeah, brace yourself. There's some more stuff coming. More interesting programming coming your way.
Faith Spotted Eagle was actually first ever time meeting an elder. And it was an honor. Like, it was cool just having her sit in our classroom.
Like, you what?
Yeah, but I mean, it was really cool, and she just told her story, and that was the whole class was just her talking, and it was. I mean, it was just really interesting. So I'm excited to have more opportunities like that. I think. Yeah.
I like when this last festival of books we had last September. Richard Movescamp, he has a book called My Grandfather's Altar, and his grandfather and his grandfather's, all of his descendants were medicine men. And at the festival of books, they get like a 45 to 50-minute window to speak. And he spoke for like an hour and 10 minutes. And then somebody was like, "You're going to tell him to stop?" I'm like, "No, he's an elder. I'm not telling him to stop talking."
Yeah.
This is what we need. We need him to tell us these stories. And so I got to meet Marcy Rendon and Mona Susan Power, and we hung out for a little bit. Oh, it was amazing. It was so fun.
Yeah.
Like just learning their stories and feeling like this is possible. We can do this.
We've lost our capacity to understand stories or patience to listen to stories here in America. And
we want the GPT version.
Yeah. And the way elders are treated in this country kind of appalls me, right? These are people that were a part of our community, who made the community that we're here in, regardless of whether you're native or non-native, right? You participated and you made where we live today. And at some point we just say, put them out to pasture. I mean, that's crude, but that's exactly what we do. And it should not be that way. They should be revered and celebrated. If nothing else, for their wisdom. They live their life, right? I'm getting to that point now where, I'm a very independent person. So when I was younger, my dad told me, "Well, this is how it is," and I would be like, "Nah, that's not going to happen. That's not the way it is." Turns out, some of those things that he said were probably true.
Yep.
Well, and I think about too when I talk to some of the older elders that I've spoken to. When you think that American Indians didn't even have citizenship until 1924, and then they couldn't vote until in South Dakota they weren't even allowed to vote until, although the Voting Act was passed in 1948 in South Dakota, it didn't happen until 1952. That's not that long ago. Like what?
Well, we couldn't openly practice our religion or spirituality until the 1970s. So again, this is recent history. It's not ancient history.
I'm like the whole religion thing. I was around at that time, so that's like not that long ago. Even now, I kind of think back like 1988. Oh God, that was a long time ago. Like I'm from the 1900s. Please be patient with me. And it's when you think about history, doesn't have to be. History isn't what people perceive it to be as a long time ago. No, it's not. And I mean, we're going to be suffering or experiencing the effects of all these decisions, what are happening now even. I mean, yesterday was history, but 10 years from now, what's everything going to look like if we do away with all of this? And people like us who are trying to stand up and do what's right, if we all just throw in the towel, where are we going to be? We're counting on you, Allison.
Yeah, I was thinking about that comment Joshua made. Maybe it was you, Stacy. I don't remember now, but about how in history classes in primary school, it starts with the Civil War, right?
Or pilgrims.
Or pilgrims, right? And we just pretend that nothing before ever existed. But I also feel like we pretend that nothing that's not from the American perspective exists either.
Yeah, ethnocentrism.
Because I mean, like you said, this is not ancient history. This happened, a few years ago, and I didn't learn about it until I was a junior in college. I don't know. Have you guys ever read 1984?
That's supposed to be fiction, right?
Yeah. Right.
I'm just checking. Oh boy.
Yeah, that's my favorite book. I've read it at least 3 times. And it's crazy. I don't even want to read it anymore because I'm like,
because now it's all of a sudden how-to manual.
Yeah.
It used to be fiction. I mean, now it's like. But I think it goes back to what you said, Allison. If you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, I think we're in a time where that's what the powers that be are counting on. People aren't going to stand up because, someone explained it to me as throw everything. What do they call it? It's just throw everything out there so you can't fight everything at one time. You got to pick your battles, and that's I just don't understand.
The case in point to that, like all this craziness that's going on in Washington, does anybody know what's going on in Iowa right now?
Yeah.
Trans they voted to not give to rescind civil rights for trans people in Iowa. Why isn't that national news?
I didn't know about that.
They literally took away civil rights for a group of people. What? But because of all the craziness that's going on, it's not national news.
Well, and they do it like with the suggestion to let's send all of those criminals in federal prisons to other countries and rescind their citizenship. Because they don't get to be citizens anymore because they got locked up. How did we get here?
And then we can go to the Declaration of Independence. When that was written, no one was a citizen of the United States because it didn't exist, right?
Exactly.
And it was written in there that all men are created equal, and I get it that there was qualifiers to that, right? But if we take that at its word, even if people are immigrants, whether they're here legally or not, they still have rights. All men are created equal. All people are created equal. And we've lost that capacity to see each other as humans, which is really too bad.
We've really stripped each other of our humanity, which is why the humanities are important. If it involves the human experience of life as a human being, it's covered by the humanities. I mean, you think about history and law and literature and philosophy and archaeology, anthropology, sociology, it's all the human experience. So if the current administration gets their way and we don't talk about the humanities anymore, what are we talking about? Doesn't want to talk about science or math science. Math probably is okay because we all need numbers, but science, no. Humanities, no. So I fear what happens if people stop standing up and saying, wait, more people need to stand up and say, wait a second. Like my daddy used to say, where are we going and why are we in this handbasket? You probably are too young to understand that reference, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the big issue though is that bystander effect, right? We always think somebody else will do it, so why should I have to?
I read an article today or this morning or recently that we're basically just turning into a giant audience to a drama, and people are just turning in for that, right? And we forget that maybe we don't forget we are the people, right?
Right. It seems
We
more like
are
a
in
fiction,
charge.
like a film we're watching, and it doesn't involve us.
Right.
It does. It does.
Absolutely. And I think we've just become so complacent that whether it's distrust or because a lack of education or lack of information, however, whatever it is, we, I think is we lost that curiosity too. Right?
Yeah.
We don't ask questions anymore, or if we do ask questions.
Maybe people are afraid to be asked. To some degree.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, why? I mean,
Because asking those 6 questions that I talked about, sometimes you're going to get an answer you don't want. But then that's when you get to flip the coin. Am I going to do this or am I not? Do I really want to dig into this and I think it's way too easy to say it's not worth it. Not my circus, not my monkeys. I'm just gonna I'll figure out something else I need to. But that is right there. That is when the decision needs to be made that you're going to stand up. It's just don't take the easy way out, and it's not an easy thing to do.
it's not. I always interpret that, or think that hate is easy to fall into. It's work to be a kind and patient and understanding person. What we're seeing now, or at least in my opinion, what we're seeing is people just want whatever's easiest, the path of least resistance.
Exactly.
And if that's hate, that's what they're going with.
Well, and it goes to that othering thing too, where it's, as long as I'm above this person, I'm one of the cool kids. Okay, you're not a trillionaire or a billionaire, so you're in the other category. But that reminded me when you were talking, you said hate, and I had a thing in my old classroom at the high school that said hate is like acid; it destroys the object in which it is stored as well, or on which it is poured as well as the object in which it is stored. So hate is pervasive, not just against other people, but when you yourself are filled with hate, you destroy yourself. So it's just.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't see, must just have been the way that I was raised. Thanks, mother. But hate does not seem like the easy road to me in any way.
And see, for some people, it's just the opposite. It's easier just to hate everybody else because that doesn't look like me. Because and people are raised that way. Children are not born hating people. It's taught. So we need to unteach it somehow. And I think the younger generations are the only way we're going to get there because it's going to take building that up from the younger generations coming up to replace the hate and the divisiveness and everything else that's so prevalent now. But said we're counting on you, Allison.
Well, I think, it's tend to try to put a positive spin on this, right? We saw during COVID, the huge inequities in communities that were happening, right? So all of a sudden, schools were sending students home, especially in Native communities. They didn't have a way to access online courses, right? So then I know that there's work being done now to make sure that reservations do have that capability, right? That is something that is being corrected. So my hope is that we're going through this painful process and people are going to realize maybe capitalism isn't that great.
Yeah.
Maybe the status quo isn't where you need to be.
Exactly. Or, let's maybe we shouldn't return to the 1980s when we were ignoring the AIDS crisis and we were on the brink of I don't know anyway.
It's so bizarre to me that we are where we are. Because wow, when we've always been like Ronald Reagan called us the shining beacon on the hill, and now nobody wants to talk to us. So and not to go out there, but I'm like, go out there in like 7 weeks. And we have to fight. And I don't know, and I don't mean that in a literal sense, but just stand up to disinformation and hate, and Be the change you wish to see in the world, like Mahatma Gandhi says.
I think I just saw recently that the United States was put on the list of, I don't know, do you know what it's called?
I don't remember the exact name of the list, but it's a list that tracks declining civil rights within a nation.
Yeah.
And we were put on that list.
Yes, we were.
Yeah.
Well, to bring this all back to research, though, our communities were, indigenous studies is multidisciplinary. Is that the term?
And there's a lot of pieces to it.
Interdisciplinary, is that maybe that's better. Right? We were humanitarians, we were scientists. It was all put into one, right? So I think even though we're not like the last maybe 20 minutes we were talking about is maybe it wasn't directly tied to research, but yes, it is, right? Because it all comes down to how people are treated, how do we show respect for one another, how do we present that, how we present ourselves or others to people. All of that involves research.
And the piece about land stewardship and indigenous food sovereignty programs and all the things that are innovative things that are going on in tribal communities, we all can learn from that. We need to take care of this land. We need to take care of the environment. When we thought, the Keystone Pipeline thing, what happened up in Standing Rock, and then I'm kind of blown away sometimes when I think about just the damming of the river, how much that destroyed all of the. When I had a piece on indigenous food sovereignty a few weeks ago, we talked about how elders used to go out and forage for foodstuffs that were available along the Missouri River, and when they flooded that land to build the dam, that took all of that away. So if we keep destroying things like this just in the name of advancement or technology, we're really destroying ourselves. We have to be more cognizant of what we're doing. Yeah. Because like Joshua said, ranchers and farmers, landowners, and indigenous peoples all love the land. So why is there so much division? We need to be coming together on this and saying, okay, you know what, we got to make this last. We got to fix it if it's not too late to fix it. So researching that, then what worked? What's going on now that is destroying everything? And then how do we mitigate that? How do we fix it?
Yeah, we don't seem to have that capacity to project things out, right?
We can look back, but can't,
And I think that's really a downfall for us too, because that shows that we have a lack of imagination, things that could happen by the decisions we make today, right?
Choices have consequences.
So, yeah, maybe, yes, there were laws put into place. People were going out there and changing things without doing any studies or considering what it would do to the environment or the people. But laws were policies were put in place to help rectify that, and now we have someone in the White House that's like, no, we don't need to do environmental studies. We're putting ourselves in a position to where we're going to destroy ourselves. Society's collapse is going to be because of us.
Absolutely. And you're not. Yeah, it's funny, but it's not funny because it's like, I guess a few billionaires can probably go to a different planet, but the rest of us, this is home. We have to take care of the land and our environment and each other. The whole Keystone Pipeline thing it was national news, but I don't think people really paid attention to the importance of that. This is water.
After a while, news networks, there was a blackout.
Yeah.
News networks aren't allowed to do that. They tried to limit the cell service that was in that area.
I'm feeling deja vu.
So, I don't know. Something.
Who I really, 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 if you ask me who I really want to speak to, it's Nick Tilson. Nick Tilson, if you happen to ever see this, I really want to talk to you.
Who knows Nick?
You.
No.
Whitney.
John Little. Oh, he spoke in one of our classes at Crazy Horse, so.
I'm going to have to be giving John a call anyway. I do have to get in touch with him. I'm so excited to have him on the show. And he's, that's another thing that, when I think about the limitations that have been put on um, Indigenous peoples who are working at the university and the state level who have been told that they can't put their tribal affiliation in their signature. So you're going to take somebody's identity? I don't. What's the purpose? Because
Right.
it's divisive.
Well, that shows that administration doesn't understand what that actually means. Um, people see that and they just say, oh, you just want to project it out there. That's who you are. But with the work that we do, being affiliated with the tribe is important.
Absolutely.
So by having that in your email signatures, and you email someone that's, maybe a council person on the tribe, they're going to see that and say, "Oh, this is my kin,
Right.
right?
It's my family." Yeah.
And it's just, yeah. It's this. We all have to be the same.
As long as everything's going to be all white. I'm sorry, but let's call it what it is.
And
well, and even with the EO that came out, that's the piece about divisiveness in education, where what you can teach it for as far as history, and I got to the part about tribal schools not being able to teach tribal history. Excuse me. Explain that to me. Yeah. So we can teach history as long as it's, what did you call it? Convenient history. Yeah. We all have the same history. Everything's just right across the border. Thanksgiving was just a great old party, and we all brought our friends. No. So I don't know. I'm excited for that. I'm going to put in a plug for that museum on Main Street Americans exhibition. It's going to be amazing. We have like the 5. I'm excited because the book ending ones, the beginning and the end ones are SDSU and USD. But then in between we have 3 tribal, or like on tribal lands, we have Standing Rock and then Pine Ridge and I guess St. Joe's, the Acto Lakota Museum in St. Joe's are going to host it. So I imagine the exhibition pieces that they're going to put together are going to be pretty amazing. And hopefully we're going to have that's one thing too. We are having the entire exhibition translated into the Lakota language, which we did with Spark, and now that's our last tour, and now that's a permanent part of the Smithsonian Institution. So it's little things, making the visibility out there, saying, you know what, like John Little had said, I think, or was it Anton Troyer, we are still here. And the book that I think Allison is reading it with me, the Anton Troyer's book, Everything You Wanted to Learn About Indians But Were Afraid to Ask. But he's such a good author and such a good scholar. And I think it's pieces like that just the title of that book is something that people would be scared to say.
Yeah.
I mean, like everything you wanted to know, but we're scared to ask. Okay.
Well, us Indians know how to get your attention.
Exactly. It's like putting on the cover of the book, controversy included.
I mean, you could go back to the original Indigenous Studies or Native American Studies book. Custer died for your sins.
Yep, Mind the Lord.
That was, a direct play on Christianity, right? Jesus died for your sins. Well, guess what happened?
And God is red.
Yep. So, I mean, we sometimes we're being facetious about this, but we're saying those things to make a point. Like,
right.
We have leaders too. We have a history too.
And researching it is so rewarding and fun. I mean, I love it. I mean, I'm a nerd. I am a hardcore nerd. And so the people at work pick on me because I'm taking stuff home every day. And they're like, what are you doing tonight? I'm like, I'm going to read this book. Or I'm going to research this. Or I'm like, and your mom in particular is like, you're supposed to enjoy your evenings. I'm like, I am. I am. I'd be doing this anyway. So it can be a slippery slope because once you get into it, you don't want to. For me, I did. There's nothing else I'd rather do.
It's a commitment.
Yeah.
And it can be a burden, but it's something that you have to be very intentional about.
For sure.
So if you have no intention of following through,
That's the big
don't
one.
start.
Yeah.
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 Well, and not only that for yourself, what Joshua was saying is important not only just for you, but for the indigenous people, because they've been sold short many times by people promising that, oh, I'm doing this research because I want to help you. No, they didn't, and that just creates distrust on top of distrust. So makes the path longer and harder.
Yeah.
But
Well, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to building those connections and making sure that I do it right. Um, get some good word out there, you know. I think that's all the questions I have for you guys. Thank you so much for coming and recording with me. I really appreciate all of the insight that you've given me today.